Our next talk, Marketing Engineers Along the Buyer's Journey, will be perfect setup because because our next speaker will talk about these subjects. Dan Staresinic is our next speaker. Is the Vice President of Marketing and Communications, Process Industries and Drives from Siemens Industry Incorporation. Dan is Vice President of Marketing and Communications for the Process Industry Division of Siemens in the U.S. His business partners with customers to help them achieve great control and confidence in their manufacturing operations. This is accomplished through advanced manufacturing applications in electrification, automation, software, and services. A chemical engineer by degree, Dan began his career in manufacturing operations, supply chain management, and new product launch roles with Procter & Gamble, Pepsi, and Motorola. His transition to consulting, marketing, and sales with Commerce One, Deloitte, and PLM software firm, UGS, that was acquired by Siemens in 2007. It's a great honor to bring Dan up today. Dan's role at Siemens is focused on helping one of the world's great industrial products companies to also be a great B2B marketing and sales organization. Dan has 4 children, comes up from Cincinnati, Ohio, commutes to Atlanta, and I guarantee you he's going to put on a great presentation. Dan?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Jim, I don't know how well thought out the sequence actually is. How many of you would actually like to present after Dane? Well, we'll try. I feel like I should have a puppy up here with me or something, to get to the other side of the brain. This is called Meeting Engineers Along the Buyer's Journey. These may be the grandfathers of the people that we market to today. I think it's a rocket, some kind of landing module behind them. And I was humored by this last night as I was going over this again. I've had this dilemma where I think everything I'm going to say today probably isn't new to you. I'm going to tell it in a sequence of breakthroughs that we feel like we've had at Siemens. But when you add it all together, it's really not rocket science, right? I think you've all probably been through this. For us, it's very important. The way these breakthroughs threaded together for us have put us in a better place than we were only just 2 to 3 years ago. And hopefully something in here will be relevant for you as well. So one of the things about this picture that I noticed is how excited this fellow was about that thing in his hand, that brand new calculator, I guess. He got his first TI-68, he taught it how to do a trick. I used to do that with my calculator. So I just want to say hello to you all. The answer is obvious already to this question, right? I already feel like I'm going to be better at marketing to engineers tomorrow. I've written a bunch of things already. Our organization gets up every day and has for a few years explicitly trying to be better at marketing to engineers and those people with whom engineers collaborate in a buying process. That's what motivates us and drives us right now. As I mentioned, I will talk about our journey as a series of breakthroughs. There will be 5 breakthroughs that I mentioned today. And in order to do that, I think I need to give you some background about where we started, what kind of organization we are, and that'll help frame these breakthroughs and why they were so important. But I also want to make this a little bit interactive. And so, what do you know? Tell me something you know about Siemens. And guys from Eaton and ABB, please be kind, courteous. Yes? Yes, we are one of the largest suppliers of motion control systems in the world. Something else? Yep, that's it. That's all we do. Well, here's a little different. Thank you, by the way. I don't have a book to give you. We view ourselves as a technological pioneer in motion control and everything else we do. We want to be the technological pioneer. We have a lot of engineers on staff, and we have a huge R&D budget. I think we don't go into a market category unless we believe there's a multi-decade technological roadmap into which we can play and through which we can become the leader in that category. It's who we are. Right? Consequently, we find ourselves often involved in very complicated projects. Right? This is where we shine, actually. We have this deep bench of engineers. We have this broad technology base that we're working all the time. It gives us an opportunity to engage in a very complex kind of setup, become the technical advisor, and help really co-develop the future with our customer as a partner. It means necessarily that we take a consultative approach in everything we do. It's complicated. We're never going to be, let's say, the least expensive bidder on a project. Right? So we need time to really understand, and as Dane said, build that trusting relationship so that they know when they go with us, so they really believe when they go with us, this project won't fail, this project can't fail. Okay, but this takes time. Another way to show this is on a calendar. If we knew that a big vendor award was going to be made sometime in December, arbitrarily here, December 9th, when do you think Siemens would first want to find out that that award is going to be made? Who said January? Yes, January. In fact, if I could make that calendar go back to 2014, I'd put it in January of 2014. Because I want time. I want to explore the different technical opportunities in this project and see just how far we can go to create an improvement for this customer. See where we can go together. Unfortunately, often it's a Friday afternoon, often it's in the summer, and everybody's on vacation, and we get an RFP, a request for proposal. This should be good news, right? We should be singing and dancing. But when that happens, there's a problem, and those of some are smiling because you probably feel the very same way about it. When that RFP shows up, it means something. It means somebody else is the technical advisor, and it's not us. Right? It means we're fighting from behind. It means we have an uphill battle. It probably means we will lose a disproportionate share of those RFPs. Even though we might have the technology to do it, certain technological decisions have already been made, and it's going to be tough to come from behind on that. So why does that happen? Again, this is one of those things that I know you know it, but I have to say it anyhow. It wasn't too long ago that, we've seen some of the numbers here, 39% of the buying process is done, 70% of some percent of the buying process is done by the time the prospective customer picks up the phone and calls a vendor. I really believe that. But it wasn't always like that, right? It wasn't too long ago that you couldn't get the information you wanted. If you were a buyer, you couldn't get the information you wanted online. It wasn't there. You literally had to call somebody, right? You'd call an analyst, you'd call one of your colleagues in your company, you'd call those pesky vendors and ask them to come in and talk to you about their technology direction and so on. This was our chance to become the trusted advisor. This was our chance to establish a point of view and win or lose based on that. But at least have the chance of influencing that technology path appropriately. But we know this is what happens today, right? That's why I get an RFP on a Friday afternoon that I didn't even know was coming. Because all the research has been conducted. Yes, probably one of my beloved competitors is advising, they're incumbent in that account, and they're advising, but I didn't even have a chance to do anything about it, right? So this is the problem. And if you're a big, gigantic, strong, muscled German company, he's Austrian, I know. I couldn't come up with a big, strong, muscled German guy like that. This is an existential moment. we have to be involved earlier. So how are we going to do it? And that's where these breakthroughs begin to come in. All right, so I will tell this story as a series of things that we think we learned, what new kinds of thoughts and behaviors that generated in our organization, and yet how each one of these breakthroughs led us to the realization of something else very important that we didn't yet know and had to study, thus the successive breakthroughs. I said I wanted to make it interactive. Everybody's got a sheet of paper on the table. You actually have a tablet. I'd like you to take one sheet of paper. Kristen was very specific that there needed to be a takeaway for every presenter. She thought she meant a presentation, which I guess is a mistake. I have a different idea. Just paper should be blank on both sides, okay, laying out in front of you, kind of like a rectangle there. And the first thing you're going to do, please, is fold that paper thusly. Okay? Very good. And do it again, like this, so that when you open it back up, you have 4 lovely sections on which you can write. So you'll need a pen or a pencil. This will be your takeaway. You don't have to do it. I'd like you to do it. I'd like to see how this works. Actually, I was in the audience when this gentleman, Dan Rome, who I mentioned on the prior slides, did this, and it was an amazing way to remember what he shared. So I hope it'll work. Okay, first thing to do is write the number 1 in the upper left-hand corner, followed by these words. Buyers are on a journey. This was actually our first breakthrough. And then a little picture. A vector. I am an engineer. A vector. Kind of in that middle space there with 1 extra dot in it, and a dollar sign on the right-hand side. Breakthrough 1. Okay, put a 2 in the upper left-hand corner of the upper right-hand block. And the words, buyers are personas. And then have a little bit of fun. 3 faces, make them look different. You're going to have to draw them. Well, you won't have to draw them. I'm going to have to draw them one more time. 3 faces, any kind of face, representing 3 different personas. Now the number 3 goes in the bottom left-hand block. And the words, there are multiple journeys. You can repeat that little vector from up above, but it'll be joined by 2 others, a shorter one above it, and a longer one below it. And breakthrough 4. Lead quality matters. So boldly stroke the word quality there. Put a line under it. This is the complicated part. Rotate your page so that you can write the word quantity upside down. Quality over quantity. Okay, those are our first 4 breakthroughs. But I said there were 5. So one more thing to do, flip that page over. Bottom right-hand corner, put the number 5. Okay. You want me to go backwards?
Yeah.
Okay. How am I doing on time, Kristen? Three, 2, 1. Okay. The number 5 goes in the bottom right-hand side with the word grow skills. You can represent that any way you want. Here's a way, S-K-I-L-L-S, growing up to the right, bigger letters. Okay, if you like anything from this point forward about any of these breakthroughs, this is your mnemonic to remember it. I'm going to move on now. Those are the 5 breakthroughs in order. Come back to that slide later. Let's address the first one, buyers are on a journey. You would think that we knew buyers were on a journey, even 2 years ago, but we didn't. We talked about a sales cycle. We talked about a selling process. It was kind of me-oriented. We sell, we sell, we sell. I ended up going to an event with some of the Siemens colleagues. It was called the Serious Decisions Summit. Do any of you know who Serious Decisions is? All right, a number of you know. This is a consultancy that specializes in B2B marketing and sales. We found them to be pretty smart. They have a model for everything. We walked into this event called the Serious Decisions Summit. There were 2,000 people there, all speaking this gobbledygook on this side. AQL, MQL, well, my TGLs aren't really matching up with my SQLs. What are you talking about? But it was actually brilliant because as an engineering company and as an engineer myself, I could see a process here, something repeatable, something measurable. And that's exactly what this is. This is their so-called waterfall. This is their re-architected demand waterfall. What it allowed us to grasp and they kept using the words like buyer's journey, or you're not really selling, you shouldn't be selling, you should be helping buyers to buy from you. It was very buyer focused. So we got this idea that buyers were on a journey. And we left that event to create our own version of a buyer's journey that could be helpful to us in improving our marketing capability. If you were to go Google buyer's journey, you can find quite a few. Here's a very simple one, 3 parts, right? And this is very logical. There's a number of things we sell where that really feels like the way the buying process happens. Then there are more complicated ones. This one, you can see the credits at the bottom. I only tripped over this one because Wendy from True Marketing pulled this one out from a 2012 blog post from Forrester. But the whole story here is, no, it's not linear. If you think it's linear, you're wrong. You know, now that buyers can go anywhere and search any time, it's anything but linear. Same with the influencers that get involved with that. And yet, I can't operationalize something like that prior page. Now, this one actually has 3 sections, just like the first one did. This isn't mine. This isn't ours. But you can see the complexity that gets added in when you start breaking apart what's going on in the awareness phase, for example, down at the bottom, and all the different stopping points that might be there. And then what this person tried to do is show which marketing tools or tactics might line up with different parts of the buying process. Now, this wasn't explicitly built for an engineer, although it may have been built by an engineer. It's pretty complicated, right? And if you think about your own business and the journey that your buyers may be going through, it's all these lining up, stacked very beautifully, buyer 1, buyer 2, buyer 3, 4, 5, buyer N. Okay, there may be multiple flavors of engineers involved in buying this $5 million deal. A couple finance people, purchasing people, and a big boss who's going to sign the check in the end. They've all got a journey to go through, right? It's not just about meeting engineers along the buyer's journey. It's about meeting engineers and everybody else with whom they collaborate along the buyer's journey. This was our big takeaway from this. So it's a very complicated scenario, but that's good because if it was easy, anybody could do it, right? So we want to be better, and we're going to focus on this. In the end, we came away from this first breakthrough really externalizing our focus. Instead of our mission being about being more productive, and how we spend our money, serving our internal customers better, we built this mission statement. For us, it now suddenly became about identifying prospective buyers whom the sales force should contact, and I mean today, right? There's an ocean of companies out there with prospective buyers, and those are the blue ones. But as soon as somebody is getting ready to enter into a buying process, back in January of 2015, when they're conceiving of a December vendor award, that's when they turned orange, and that's when I want to know them. So that's the focus here. How do we get to that point? This brought us to breakthrough 2. You can't really do anything about that if you don't really know to whom you're selling, right? In this case, engineers and those with whom they collaborate. We heard a bit about that already today. Poll question. Okay, this is my poll question. Fire it up. I won't tell you what I think personas are yet. You know what you think personas are. Okay, good. 100% have 100% complete. Look at that. Fair enough. But you hear a lot about personas these days, right? It's buyer personas has become a big, big topic. There's a brand new book out, came out last week, called Buyer Personas. And it's actually a pretty decent book. It's written by Adele Ravella. If any of you have worked with Adele or know Adele, she's from the Buyer Persona Institute. The methodology, that's our personas, right? That's who we're going for. And you can see the diversity, right? So it really behooves, the guy has non-black pants on the left. It behooves us to do research to really understand the buying process. I'm joking a little bit, right? But some of them may be electronics engineers, some of them may be mechanical engineers. We need to figure that out. They may think differently. They may be looking for different cues throughout the buying process. This Buyer Persona Institute has a methodology. This happens to be the methodology that's been applied, in our case, 5 rings of insight. Imagine if you could go out and sit across the table from dozens and dozens of representative buyers of your products and pierce every one of these issues with them and interact with them for 45 minutes. The whole while transcribing that. And then pour back over all of those transcripts later looking for patterns. Being able to pull verbatims out that stand for what they said their priority initiatives or their success factors or their decision criteria are. Well, that's what we did. We invested heavily, very heavily, to really understand who our buyers were and what they were trying to tell us. We also invested heavily in understanding the kind of research that we saw today. This is from a prior year. As Pat said, who knew that engineers, except engineers, would go to page 5 happily before there's Google's wrong. My search string isn't wrong, right? I just need to go further to find what I'm looking for. That's right. So maybe we don't have to pay to be on the top half of page 1 if we want to get our message out, right? Maybe we can save that powder and use it elsewhere. And so these are the kind of things that we learned, both from the qualitative research and the quantitative research that thankfully CFE and True have pulled together for us. In the end, you have to represent that knowledge in an actionable fashion. And this again is from the Buyer Persona Institute. This is their version of the Persona dashboard. You can see those 5 rings of insight in the different tabs going across the top. But if you look at it, you can kind of get an idea what might be behind those tabs. Okay? The message here is in our second breakthrough, we invested heavily in personas. But the reason we did that, recall, is because we had to figure out how to operationalize the buyer's journey. And here's how that works. There's your personas from earlier, and there's an arbitrary 6-stage buyer's journey. In fact, we did conceive a 6-stage buyer's journey. Once you lay that out, what you actually already know from these interviews, and really from some of the quantitative data, is what it's going to take for that top person, that engineer, to convert from step 1 to step 2, from stage 2 to stage 3, and so on in the buying process. They've told you what it's going to take to convert them through the buying process. You're obliged to give it to them. Okay, so this engineer said, I need a technical white paper. I need to know what I need to know before I'm willing to consider myself sufficiently educated to let you begin to tell me about how you do that, and so on and so on. But then that finance person on the second line is looking for something completely different, right? They're looking for a financial point of view. So you provide an economic white paper to them, and then you let them go for a while. They don't have anything going on in the next couple of stages, and so on. Right? So you create the assets. I would modify that to say you source the assets. Right? Steve talked about content stream. Right? I may not have to create every asset on this page in order to get the job done. Some of it's probably out there, and other smart people put it together, so I don't need to duplicate it. Okay? And then you drive conversion like crazy. You put that content where they're going to be, where they told you they are going to be. Right? Make sure they bump into it. And you do this thing called helping them buy from you instead of selling to them. Right? And an important point here is that if you focused all of your energy on helping the engineer get through the different stages, you wouldn't have a buying decision because the others have to come along too. So it's about understanding that full complement of buyers in the buying center and understanding each of them as well as you try to understand the engineer. At least that's the way it is for us. Well, as soon as we tried to apply that to every single thing we do, we became guilty of overcomplicating some of our product lines and not being complicated enough, if you will, subtle enough for some of our other product lines. And what we discovered was there's more than one kind of buyer's journey. The easiest way for me to represent that is to offer the idea of a low consideration purchase. I used to work at Pepsi-Cola, as you heard. I was a maintenance manager at Pepsi-Cola. I had filler heads. If one of the fillers breaks, I had the authority to do whatever I needed to do to get that filler back up. I could spend $50,000 to air freight something from across the country or halfway around the world if I needed that line to run, and I had to get it back up. But I couldn't spend $500 on pencils, right? Because that needs to go through a buying process. Okay, so getting my filler back up is a low consideration purchase. I know what I need to do. The next step up I would call a high consideration purchase. The machine's broken, but you know what? The darn thing breaks all the time and I'm sick of it. And I've arranged to have some excess capacity, maybe some excess inventory, maybe my sister plants can help pick up some of the slack while I do something really meaningful with this piece of equipment. So I may look at modernizing at that point in time or doing a more radical kind of investment in that line. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to have a little more complicated buyer's journey. I'm going to need different information before I get to a buying decision. And then there's something beyond that, a truly transformational purchase where your company, and I mean you or us, in your wisdom, has solved some problem that your buyer doesn't even know they have yet. And you try selling that to them. And you know that the first step is actually a very, very sophisticated education process, where you're literally talking about what you've discovered that they don't even know yet, and why that's a problem for them, and why it's a problem that they need to act to solve now instead of waiting. Right? That's an even longer buying process. It's arbitrary. We could probably come up with a model that had 4 or 2 or 6. This Serious Decisions group, I said they have a model for everything. Their model is very convenient for dealing with these different kinds of buying processes. They have a new concept, a new paradigm, and an established market definition for their 3 demand types. And they roughly line up with those 3 kinds of buying processes. What's so important about this is that it changes the implementation of what we learned in steps 1 and 2. Why would I impose a 6-step buying process on a decision where what's really required of me is to be ready to ship when the machine breaks? Right? I don't need to go through a big long education process. I just need to replace the part that broke. Right? So you really need to be sensitive. What we learned is we needed to be sensitive, and we needed to know more about the taxonomy of the buying environment, and that's what this model helped us to do. It was wonderful, and then it was also kind of strange because our marketing, this conversation would happen all the time. We'd be trying to plan a program, and we had just brought the entire marketing team through an education process, what buyers' journeys are and what different demand types are, and we were ready to go make things happen. And then you get one of these that happens. I would walk by rooms and I would actually watch meetings devolve into whiteboard sessions for 45 minutes about so-and-so's point of view on what an established market is versus somebody else's point of view on what an established market is. And that didn't need to happen, right? There is a sufficient definition of these things. What needed to happen was education. So we needed to get everybody on the same page about what this vernacular was and what these processes and methodologies were that we had decided to implement. Okay, so that's what we did next. And that concluded our, let's say, our third breakthrough, which led us to number 4 here. Quality over quantity. It's so tempting when you know all this stuff to just throw money in the machine and produce leads and feel like you're doing the right thing. We actually had created what we would refer to as a lead factory, a hot lead factory. We could spend money in a very organized way and produce what we were calling hot leads. I mean, we were always on. We could go to sleep and the thing would still produce leads because it's digital, right? It's always on. When somebody goes online, they move through the process and we watch them do it. We had an agreement with the sales organization. We were wise enough to have a service level agreement with our sales team that said, when we produce a hot lead, we're going to route it to the right salesperson, and within 24 hours, 48, they're going to respond to it. They're going to do something. They're going to call. And then they're going to give us feedback on whether it was a really good lead or not. Right? Yes, handshake, done. So, that's what really happened. We were producing what we called hot leads, and they were getting no response. Now, we know why. If I asked you to define what a hot lead was, 130 different definitions, or however many people are in the room, we wouldn't use the same words to describe it, right? We were ambiguous and vague in our definition of what a hot lead was, and we had poisoned the well for many, many, many cycles before this by turning over leads that had no right to be turned over to a salesperson. Okay, so they knew one thing. When the workflow came and a hot lead was there, the right thing to do was delete it so that they could get back to selling something. Right? So this was our response to that. Again, this is a serious decisions thing. I sound like a broken record, but this is what worked for us. This is their lead spectrum. Okay, the lead quality gets better as you move down the page. Our original definition of a hot lead was somewhere between 1 and 2 on this scale. Sales requirement for a hot lead was somewhere between 3 and 4 on this page. That's when they wanted it handed over. Between 1 and 2 is when we were handing it over. That's a problem, right? That's why, that's what we fixed next. So the net of all that is we began to get some results. Sales is increasingly following up on the leads they receive. We've established an actual pipeline of opportunities that we wouldn't have known about any other way than these programs we put in place. We're finding opportunities with accounts that we've never called on because well, I'll get to that. We're closing business, and importantly, I had that last bullet there, I went off of it. Every single time we think we've made a breakthrough and addressed it, we find another opportunity for a breakthrough. Okay, I'll get to that in a moment. First, an example to help make this real. We have a business in which we're one of the leaders. In fact, I think we're the world leader in this business. The average sales price when we close a deal is between $500,000 and $700,000, and we know that the buying process takes 8 to 12 months on average. We know this because we've been in this business a long time. When we turned this process on full blast in that particular business of ours, in that particular category, what began to happen was deals were closing. One of the very first leads that came out of the system, truly hot leads that came out of the system when we handed it off to sales, a $600,000 deal closed in 4 months. This was very surprising with a company we had never called on before. Deals aren't supposed to close for the average value in less than 8 to 12 months, especially with companies who we don't know. And it happened again. And what we realized out of all this is that one of those very first slides was real. People are out consuming the first 4 to 5 months of the buying process online. They're not telling us. But now we're out there meeting them along the very earliest stages of their buyer's journey. helping them to make the decision to buy from us. And our reward is a shorter sales cycle and an expanding market. Companies that we don't even have salespeople calling. So for us, this became real and it works. Brings us to the fifth breakthrough, which was growing skills. And I no longer would call that the fifth breakthrough. I would call that a continuous process. And I would say there are many more breakthroughs in front of us here. I don't know we may know what number 5 really is now. We may have an eye on what 6 may be. But at every step of this process, we know we don't want to repeat that scenario where the one cameo is talking to the other cameo and they're like, what? Right? So we have to build the skills in the organization so we have a consistent, repeatable, scalable capability to do all that I think we're capable of. So I just modify that earlier slide to say it's really about breakthrough after breakthrough and continuously growing skills in the organization. That's that. Do I have time for questions or not?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Do you have time for questions? Oh. Hi.
On the slide where you had the 5 levels of full to high lead.
Okay. I'll go back.
Yeah. That one. You said you were turning them over originally between levels 1 and 2. And now you're turning them over at 4 and 5. Who's taking care of them now between level 4?
Well, I mean, that'll be different, I guess, based on a corporate structure. In our case, we've inserted a couple steps there. One of them is, how many of you use telequalification right now? After you bring a lead up to a certain quality level, you apply telequalification, actually have a human being talk to a human being. Yes? That's a big, that moves a lead from level 1. Once you get to level 1.5 or 2 on this chart, the human-to-human interaction either confirms that it's really just a 1 or a 2, or it moves it the whole way to a 4. And so, you know, I don't actually want to get into maybe the structure that we use to do that as much as to say that's an example of something that we do to bring that about. Another one is just stepping back and thinking about what are all these opportunities for human-to-human interaction that I have during a regular course of business, like at trade shows. What do your folks actually do at trade shows? Do they go with the intent to convert level 1 leads to level 4? Or do they go with the intent to collect business cards? Or what? Right? So every human-to-human interaction is an opportunity to move a lead forward.
Step 5, you talked about growing skills. Can you mention a few specific kinds of skills you're teaching them when you say that?
Yes. So marketing automation is going to be a topic in a little bit. It's an essential part of what we do. I mentioned that we're always on, okay? And what I mean is digitally, the ability to get somebody from level 0, if you will, an unknown quantity, up to about level 2 exists just based on whatever content we've populated into our digital environment and the workflows that kick off emails and ads and so on. So we had to get better at writing good emails. Right? We may have wonderful content, but if the subject line of the email is a non-starter, that content will never see the light of day. Right? So that's just an example of a skill. Then there's a more general knowledge base that had to be established, and this has to do with the vernacular. We found a course, it's not one we made up, that we decided that's the one. We're going to standardize our language according to the way that purveyor of training does their thing. Okay? And it doesn't have to be that one. But if you say the word established market and everybody in your company knows exactly what it means, it doesn't matter if you call it established market or commodity market or whatever. You're all going to be efficiently operating the same thought engine.
A clarifying question about your situation. Do you go to market through a channel or all of your salespeople, company?
Both.
And what kind of difference in experience did you have where you had a channel where you had to manage this through versus direct salespeople?
Yep. In the example that I used, the one business with the $500,000 to $700,000 average sale price, when we get a lead, we can see the text, the geography of the lead, the situation of that lead, the demographics of that lead, tells us if we have to route it into a channel or it goes to one of our salespeople. So that's one way we do the integration. I would say one of our next breakthroughs is how do we actually, we think we've developed quite a capability. How do we use that to advantage our entire partner network? So we don't really know exactly how to do that yet, but that's clearly an opportunity.